In the skies of war, mistakes were never forgiven. Every mission turned into a gamble with fate, where a single moment decided who would return to Earth and who would vanish into the clouds forever. Nikolai Skomorokhov began as an ordinary boy from a village, yet soon his name struck fear into anyone who dared face him in aerial combat. He fought through hundreds of battles and was never shot down, but behind this flawless record lie stories people preferred not to speak aloud. Moments when victory turned into a nightmare and survival became almost a miracle. His rise brought not only loud honors, but also whispers behind his back about a career that grew too fast and about secrets that seemed deliberately hidden. Who was this man in truth? A calculating tactician blessed with luck, or someone greater whose destiny was shaped not only by the hands of a pilot, but also by the hand of history? Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. The village of Lapo lay in a forgotten corner of Russia, where dreams seemed as distant as the horizon. Born on 19th May 1922 in a peasant family, Nikolai entered a world where survival mattered more than ambition. His childhood unfolded in the shadow of revolution as the old empire crumbled and the Soviet Union rose from its ashes. In 1931, the family moved to Astrakhan in search of better opportunities. The bustling harbors and factories of the city opened possibilities that rural life could never offer. Amid the noise of machinery and riverboats, a boy's fascination with technology began to take shape. After finishing school in 1935, he entered a vocational program, already showing the determination that would define his life. He even claimed in documents to be born in 1920, a calculated deception revealing not dishonesty, but ambition. Aviation at that time symbolized progress, and young men everywhere looked skyward. For Skomorokhov, aircraft were not machines, but a path to transformation. After training, he worked as a mechanic and turner before entering the Astrakhan Technical School in 1939. His hands learned the language of precision metalwork, knowledge that would later guide a fighter aircraft through battle. In 1940, he completed his studies and joined the local aero club, where the dream of flight became tangible. Mastering navigation and feeling the air's force across the wings were not abstractions, but experiences that could mean the difference between life and death. The timing was prophetic. As 1940 ended, the German war machine had already devoured much of Europe. Though Stalin still held to the non-aggression pact, the storm was visible. Nikolai's entry into military service placed him at the moment when the Soviet Union would need every skilled pilot. The atmosphere of those years crackled with uncertainty. Aviation schools expanded rapidly, training men on outdated planes while factories rushed to produce modern designs. The tension between old and new, between romantic heroism and mass warfare, created a crucible. Into it stepped Skomorokhov, with a forged birth date and genuine resolve, ready to rise from village mechanic to something far greater. In March 1942, he graduated from the Bataisk Military Aviation School of Pilots, which had been relocated to Yevlakh due to the German invasion of the Soviet Union. The relocation itself told the story of those desperate early months, entire institutions fleeing westward as German forces swept across Soviet territory with terrifying efficiency. The Bataisk school's move to Yevlakh in Azerbaijan reflected the chaos and improvisation that characterized the Soviet war effort in its initial phase. Instructors and cadets found themselves teaching and learning in unfamiliar surroundings, with equipment hastily transported and reassembled. Yet this adversity forged resilience. Students who might have enjoyed comfortable barracks and established routines, instead learned to adapt, to make do, to find solutions where none seemed to exist. From March to October 1942, he was assigned to the 25th Reserve Aviation Regiment, where he trained on the La-GG-3 in Adjikabul until his was deployed to the war front. The La-GG-3, a machine that would become both his training ground and his early battlefield companion. This aircraft embodied the contradictions of Soviet wartime aviation, reasonably well-armed and structurally sound, yet heavy and sluggish compared to its German adversaries. 8 months of training might seem extensive, but these months occurred during some of the darkest periods of the war. While Skomorokhov mastered the La-GG-3's controls, German armies approached the gates of Moscow and Leningrad. The Caucasus region, where he trained, remained relatively secure, but reports from the front painted stark pictures of aerial combat, where inexperienced Soviet pilots often survived only a handful of missions. The training regimen emphasized not just flying skills, but combat survival. Instructors, many of them veterans of the Spanish Civil War or the early months of the Eastern Front, understood that technical proficiency alone wouldn't keep pilots alive. They taught evasive maneuvers, formation flying, aircraft recognition, and the psychological preparation necessary for aerial combat. Students learned to function under extreme stress, to make life-or-death decisions in milliseconds, and to maintain discipline even when faced with overwhelming enemy superiority. During these months, Skomorokhov absorbed lessons that extended far beyond piloting technique. He observed how different personalities responded to pressure, how some men cracked, while others seemed to thrive on danger. He learned to read the subtle signs that distinguished confident veterans from nervous newcomers, knowledge that would prove invaluable when he later commanded squadrons and wings. The La-GG-3 demanded respect rather than affection from its pilots. Its mixed construction, wood and steel carefully engineered to save weight while maintaining strength, required different handling than all-metal aircraft. Pilots learned to compensate for its tendency toward nose heaviness, to manage its somewhat unpredictable stall characteristics, and to maximize its advantages in armament and structural durability. The year 1942 stretched endlessly for those preparing for combat. News from the front arrived in fragments, reports of desperate battles, heroic sacrifices, tactical innovations, and strategic retreats. The siege of Leningrad continued. Stalingrad became a byword for urban warfare, and German forces pushed deep into the Caucasus Mountains. Each bulletin reinforced the reality that Skomorokhov and his fellow trainees would soon face the most experienced and successful air force in the world. Yet this extended preparation period, forced by circumstances rather than planned by doctrine, ultimately served Soviet aviation well. Unlike the early war period when hastily trained pilots were thrown into combat after minimal instruction, men like Skomorokhov received thorough grounding in both flying skills and tactical thinking. They emerged from training not as cannon fodder, but as competent aviators ready to engage in aerial warfare as equals rather than victims. In November 1942, Skomorokhov arrived at the war front as a junior pilot in the 164th Fighter Aviation Regiment. The transition from training to combat strips away illusions with ruthless efficiency. Whatever romantic notions Skomorokhov might have harbored about aerial warfare vanished during his first encounters with the Luftwaffe. He barely survived one of his first sorties after he got cut off from the rest of his squadron and was chased by multiple Messerschmitts. Only his skillful maneuvering saved him and his fighter from the Luftwaffe. This incident, terrifying as it must have been, became a crucible that transformed potential into capability. Many pilots never survived their first separation from formation. Those who did often emerged as natural leaders and tactical innovators. The experience of being hunted by multiple Messerschmitts would have broken lesser men. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, with its superior speed and climb rate, could dictate the terms of engagement against the La GG-3. Skomorokhov's survival depended not on superior equipment, but on superior thinking, using terrain, altitude changes, and defensive maneuvers to neutralize his opponent's advantages while seeking opportunities to exploit their weaknesses. On 2 January 1943, he scored his first aerial victory, a shared kill of an FW-190. The date carries significance beyond mere chronology. January 1943 marked the height of the Battle of Stalingrad, when the tide of the Eastern Front was beginning to turn. Skomorokhov's first victory coincided with the broader Soviet resurgence, as if his personal transformation paralleled his nation's recovery from near defeat. A shared victory might seem less impressive than a solo kill, but veteran pilots understood its real significance. Coordinated attacks required communication, timing, and mutual trust. The ability to work effectively with wingmen and squadron mates distinguished professional aviators from mere individuals who happened to fly fighters. Skomorokhov's first victory demonstrated that he had already begun thinking like a team player rather than a lone wolf. It was not until 22 February 1943 that he scored his first solo victory when he shot down a Ju-87 dive bomber. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka represented a different challenge than fighters. Though less maneuverable and heavily armored, dive bombers posed significant threats to ground forces and required aggressive intercepts to prevent them from completing their attacks. Successfully engaging Stukas demanded not just individual skill, but understanding of the broader tactical situation. The progression from shared to solo victory reflected Skomorokhov's growing confidence and competence. Each engagement taught new lessons about aircraft performance, enemy tactics, and combat psychology. He learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when opponents were experienced veterans versus nervous newcomers, knowledge that helped him choose appropriate tactics for different situations. He scored one more aerial victory while flying the La GG-3 in March, before he switched to flying the La-5. The transition to the La-5 marked another significant milestone in his development as a pilot. The La-5, powered by a more powerful radial engine and featuring improved aerodynamics, could compete much more effectively with German fighters. Pilots who had struggled with the La GG-3's limitations found themselves suddenly capable of aggressive tactics that had previously been suicidal. His first victory on the La-5 in June, after he shot down an Me-109. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 represented the premier German fighter, flown by some of the world's most experienced pilots. Successfully engaging and destroying an Me-109 required not just skill, but courage, tactical thinking, and perhaps a measure of luck. This victory announced Skomorokhov's arrival as a serious threat to German air superiority. That victory was recreated in a Soviet propaganda film, which showed him taking off from the airfield and shooting down the enemy plane right after a meeting about his application to join the Communist Party. The propaganda film, whatever its historical accuracy, captured something important about Skomorokhov's growing reputation. Military success and political reliability intertwined in Soviet society, where personal achievement reflected not just individual excellence, but ideological commitment. Throughout the summer of 1943, he rapidly grew his victory tally, and by the end of the year, he had claimed 13 solo shoot-downs of enemy aircraft. This acceleration in victory rate indicated more than improving individual skill. By mid-1943, Soviet aviation had begun to achieve both numerical and qualitative parity with the Luftwaffe. Pilots like Skomorokhov benefited from better aircraft, improved training, and tactical doctrines that had been refined through bitter experience. The 13 victories by year's end placed Skomorokhov firmly in the ranks of successful fighter pilots, though not yet among the elite aces. Each victory represented not just personal achievement, but contribution to the broader air campaign. Every German aircraft shot down meant fewer bombs dropped on Soviet positions, fewer reconnaissance flights completed, and fewer escort missions flown to protect Luftwaffe bombers and attack aircraft. When he switched to flying the Le-5 in spring 1945, he managed to gain 9 aerial victories over the course of 1 month. This remarkable concentration of success occurred during the final months of the war, when German resistance had begun to crumble but desperate pilots still fought with the fury of the doomed. The 9 victories in 1 month demonstrated not just individual skill, but the overwhelming numerical superiority that Soviet aviation had finally achieved. By 1945, the strategic situation had reversed completely from the dark days of 1942. Soviet factories produced aircraft in quantities that dwarfed German production, while fuel shortages and training deficits had severely degraded Luftwaffe capabilities. Yet even in these favorable circumstances, achieving 9 victories in 30 days required exceptional piloting skills and tactical judgment. The psychological pressure on combat pilots cannot be overstated. Each mission carried the possibility of death or capture, and the cumulative stress of repeated combat engagements broke many otherwise competent aviators. Pilots who managed to score multiple victories over short periods often displayed not just technical competence, but unusual mental resilience. The ability to function effectively under extreme stress, to make complex decisions while being shot at, and to maintain aggressive attitudes despite constant danger separated true aces from ordinary fighter pilots. Skomorokhov's rapid success during this period also reflected his growing mastery of air combat tactics. Experienced pilots learned to read the three-dimensional battlefield, to position themselves advantageously before engaging, and to exploit brief windows of opportunity that less skilled opponents might miss entirely. They developed instinctive understanding of aircraft performance envelopes, enabling them to push their machines to the limits while avoiding the mistakes that could prove fatal. The social dynamics within fighter squadrons played crucial roles in individual success. Veteran pilots who had survived hundreds of combat missions possessed knowledge that couldn't be taught in training schools. They understood which enemy formations to avoid, which tactical situations offered opportunities, and which pilots on both sides represented particularly dangerous opponents. Skomorokhov's integration into this informal brotherhood of combat, veterans accelerated his development from competent pilot to deadly predator. The 9 victories in 1 month also occurred within the context of massive air operations involving hundreds of aircraft. Individual pilots operated as components of larger tactical systems, where coordination and communication mattered as much as individual skill. The most successful aces learned to balance personal achievement with unit effectiveness, contributing to squadron success while building their own victory tallies. Combat veterans developed almost supernatural situational awareness, the ability to track multiple threats and opportunities simultaneously while managing their own aircraft's energy state and ammunition conservation. This skill set couldn't be taught directly, but emerged through repeated exposure to aerial combat under expert guidance. Pilots who survived their first dozen missions often found themselves capable of achievements that had seemed impossible during their training. The technical evolution of Soviet aircraft also contributed to increased victory rates. By 1945, Planes like the Lei-5 and later variants incorporated lessons learned from years of combat experience. Improved engines, better armament, and refined aerodynamics gave competent pilots the tools necessary to compete effectively with German opposition. However, superior equipment remained meaningless without the skills to use it effectively. Weather, terrain, and tactical situation influenced every combat engagement. Successful pilots learned to exploit clouds for concealment, to use sun angles for tactical advantage, and to choose engagement parameters that favored their aircraft's strengths while minimizing enemy advantages. This three-dimensional chess game demanded not just quick reflexes, but strategic thinking and careful planning. The progression from novice to ace followed predictable patterns. Early missions focused on survival and basic competence. Pilots learned to maintain formation, to communicate effectively, and to avoid obvious tactical errors. Those who survived this initial phase began developing aggressive instincts and tactical innovation. The final stage involved becoming predators capable of hunting enemy aircraft with systematic efficiency. In 1944, Skomorokhov was selected as the deputy commander of a free-hunting squadron of aces formed out of the best pilots of the 295th Fighter Aviation Division. The creation of elite formations represented Soviet recognition that air warfare required not just numerical superiority, but qualitative excellence. Free hunting squadrons operated with greater tactical freedom than conventional units, seeking out and destroying enemy aircraft rather than simply providing defensive coverage. His colleagues there included flying aces Oleg Smirnov and Anatoly Volodin, who were also awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. The concentration of proven aces in a single unit created synergistic effects that multiplied individual capabilities. Experienced pilots learned from each other, sharing tactical innovations and psychological insights that enhanced overall unit effectiveness. The squadron became a laboratory for advanced air combat techniques. While the squadron did shoot down dozens of enemy aircraft, it was disbanded after 3 months of existence since regimental commanders in the 295th Fighter Aviation Division wanted their aces back, and the regiments they left suffered higher casualty rates in their absence. This administrative decision revealed the tension between specialized excellence and distributed competence. Elite units could achieve remarkable results, but at the cost of depriving regular formations of experienced leadership. The disbandment of the Ace Squadron highlighted broader challenges in military organization. Concentrating talent in specialized units created obvious advantages in terms of combat effectiveness, but it also created vulnerabilities. Regular squadrons deprived of their best pilots struggled to maintain combat effectiveness and suffered disproportionate casualties. Military commanders faced difficult choices between maximizing elite performance and maintaining overall unit standards. After the squadron was disbanded, he was assigned in April as the deputy squadron commander of the 1st Squadron of the 31st Fighter Aviation Regiment, which had worked closely with the Squadron of Aces when it existed and shared an airbase with them. He was eventually promoted to the position of squadron commander. Leadership positions require different skills than individual combat excellence. Successful squadron commanders combine tactical expertise with administrative competence and psychological understanding of their subordinates. The progression from deputy to full squadron commander reflected Skomorokhov's development as both pilot and leader. Squadron command involved responsibilities that extended far beyond personal combat performance. Commanders planned missions, managed personnel, coordinated with other units, and made decisions that determined the life and death of their subordinates. The transition from individual contributor to military leader represented as significant a transformation as the original progression from civilian to combat pilot. Over Czechoslovakia near Székesfehérvár in December 1944, Skomorokhov shot down 4 enemy aircraft in one day after he led an attack on a group of 8 FW-190 and 2 Mi-109 in one mission, and then attacked another group of 8 FW-190 in another mission. This extraordinary day of combat provided the immediate justification for his first Hero of the Soviet Union award. 4 victories in a single day represented exceptional achievement, even by ace standards. The tactical situation, leading attacks against numerically superior enemy formations, demonstrated both personal courage and leadership capability. Squadron commanders who led from the front earned the respect and loyalty of their subordinates while establishing tactical examples that influenced unit performance. During the first engagement, his wingman was shot down by an Mi-109, but on the second mission, his wingman shot down an FW-190. These details reveal the complex dynamics of aerial combat, where success and failure intermingled within individual engagements. The loss of a wingman would have been a sobering reminder that even successful missions carried terrible costs. On 28 December, he was nominated for the title Hero of the Soviet Union, which he received on 23 February 1945. The Hero of the Soviet Union represented the highest decoration available to military personnel, roughly equivalent to the American Medal of Honor or the British Victoria Cross. Recipients joined an elite brotherhood of individuals who had demonstrated exceptional courage and competence under combat conditions. The timing of the award, February 23, 1945, coincided with the Red Army's final offensive operations against Germany. Skomorokhov received his recognition as Soviet forces crossed the Oder River and prepared for the final assault on Berlin. His individual achievement paralleled the broader triumph of Soviet arms over the Nazi war machine. After gaining more aerial victories, he was nominated for a second Gold Star on 27 February 1945, which was awarded after the war on 18 August 1945. The second Hero of the Soviet Union award placed Skomorokhov in extremely exclusive company. Only a handful of individuals received this double honor, typically reserved for those whose contributions to victory extended far beyond normal expectations. The gap between nomination and award, February to August 1945, reflected the administrative chaos of the war's final months and immediate aftermath. Military bureaucracies struggled to process the enormous volume of decorations and promotions necessitated by 4 years of unprecedented warfare. Yet the eventual award confirmed official recognition of Skomorokhov's exceptional contributions to Soviet victory. By the time he received his second Gold Star, Skomorokhov had established himself as one of the premier fighter pilots in Soviet aviation. In total, he scored 44 solo and 3 shared confirmed aerial victories, having made 605 sorties and engaged in 143 dogfights. These statistics place his achievements in perspective. 47 total victories from 605 combat missions represented a success rate that few pilots could match. The 605 sorties represented an enormous accumulation of combat experience. Most fighter pilots were lucky to survive 50 combat missions. Completing more than 600 required not just skill and courage, but exceptional good fortune. Each sortie carried the possibility of mechanical failure, enemy action, or simple bad luck that could end a career or a life. 143 dogfights indicated the intensity of aerial combat on the Eastern Front. Many combat missions involved no direct contact with enemy aircraft, as pilots provided escort services, conducted reconnaissance, or performed ground support functions. Engaging in aerial combat on nearly a quarter of all missions demonstrated both the active nature of Skomorokhov's service and his aggressive pursuit of enemy aircraft. Despite the odds being against him, he was never shot down or wounded. This remarkable record of survival distinguished Skomorokhov even among other successful aces. Many pilots accumulated impressive victory totals only to be shot down or killed during later missions. Combining high victory totals with perfect survival records required exceptional skill, careful tactical thinking, and considerable luck. The perfect survival record also reflected Skomorokhov's development of personal combat techniques that maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk. Experienced pilots learned to choose engagements carefully, to position themselves advantageously before attacking, and to disengage when situations became unfavorable. The most successful aces combined aggressive hunting instincts with prudent risk management. Throughout the course of the war, he fought in the 5th and 17th Air Armies on the Transcaucasian, North Caucasian, Southwestern, and 3rd Ukrainian fronts, and participated in military operations over Caucasus, Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Austria. This geographic scope demonstrated the breadth of Skomorokhov's combat experience and his participation in virtually every major phase of the war on the Eastern Front. The multiple front assignments indicated both military confidence in his abilities and the demands of a war that consumed personnel and resources at unprecedented rates. Successful units and individuals found themselves repeatedly redeployed to crisis areas where their expertise could provide maximum impact. Skomorokhov's service record reads like a gazetteer of Eastern Front battlefields. Service with the 5th and 17th Air Armies placed him within some of the most active and successful air formations in the Soviet military. These units participated in major offensive operations and defensive battles that determined the course of the war. Assignment to premier formations reflected official recognition of both individual competence and unit reliability. The progression from defensive operations in the Caucasus to offensive campaigns in Central Europe paralleled the broader transformation of Soviet military capabilities. Pilots who began the war struggling to survive against German air superiority ended it as members of the world's largest and most experienced air force. Skomorokhov's personal journey reflected this national transformation from desperate defense to triumphant offense. Initially, he remained in his position as a squadron commander in the 31st Fighter Aviation Regiment, based in Bulgaria. But he later left the position to attend the MV Frunze Military Academy, which he graduated from in November 1949. The transition from wartime combat leader to peacetime student represented a fundamental shift in priorities and objectives. Military academies trained officers for strategic thinking and administrative responsibilities rather than tactical excellence and individual combat performance. The Frunze Military Academy represented the pinnacle of Soviet military education, preparing officers for the highest levels of command and staff responsibility. Admission required not just combat records, but demonstrated intellectual capacity and political reliability. Skomorokhov's acceptance confirmed that his superiors viewed him as potential senior leadership material, rather than simply an exceptional fighter pilot. The 4-year gap between war's end and academy graduation provided time for reflection and adjustment. Many combat veterans struggled with the psychological transition from wartime intensity to peacetime routine. The skills that made exceptional fighter pilots didn't necessarily translate directly into peacetime military success, which emphasized different competencies and personality traits. From January 1950 to May 1952, he served as the commander of the 111th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment, based in Ukraine. Regimental command represented significant advancement from squadron leadership, involving responsibility for multiple flying units and their supporting personnel. The Guards designation indicated an elite formation with distinguished combat records and corresponding expectations for continued excellence. The Ukrainian posting placed Skomorokhov in one of the Soviet Union's most strategically important regions. The Ukraine's geographic position, industrial capacity, and agricultural productivity made it a critical component of Soviet military planning. Regimental commanders in such sensitive areas required not just professional competence, but absolute political reliability. He then became the deputy commander of the 279th Fighter Aviation Division before he was made the commander of the 246th Fighter Aviation Division in January 1954. Divisional command represented another significant step up the military hierarchy. Division commanders controlled multiple regiments and their supporting elements, involving thousands of personnel and hundreds of aircraft. Such positions required administrative skills, strategic thinking, and political sophistication that extended far beyond combat expertise. The progression from regimental to divisional command within 4 years indicated rapid advancement through the peacetime military hierarchy. Such rapid promotion suggested both exceptional competence and strong political support from senior leadership. The Soviet military system carefully evaluated officers for potential advancement, balancing combat records with peacetime performance and ideological commitment. In 1958, he graduated from the Military Academy of General Staff, after which he was assigned to the post of First Deputy Commander of the 71st Fighter Aviation Corps, which was part of the Soviet forces stationed in East Germany. The General Staff Academy represented the ultimate level of Soviet military education, preparing officers for the highest levels of strategic planning and international operations. The East Germany assignment carried enormous political and military significance. Soviet forces in East Germany formed the first line of defense against NATO in Central Europe and served as both military deterrent and political symbol of Soviet power. Corps-level deputy commanders in such sensitive positions required exceptional professional competence and absolute political reliability. In February 1961, he became the commander of the unit, and in April 1968, he was promoted to be the commander of the 69th Air Army, which was renamed the 17th Air Army in April 1972. Air Army Command represented one of the highest operational positions available to aviation officers. Air Army commanders controlled multiple divisions and supporting elements, involving tens of thousands of personnel and thousands of aircraft. The timing of these promotions, 1961 and 1968, coincided with major international crises, including the Berlin Wall construction and the Czechoslovak intervention. Military leaders in such positions influenced not just operational planning, but strategic decision-making that affected international relations and global stability. By that year, he accumulated 3,500 flight hours. The accumulation of flight hours over decades of service demonstrated continued commitment to practical flying skills alongside administrative responsibilities. Many senior officers gradually reduced their flying activities as administrative duties consumed more time, but Skomorokhov maintained his connection to operational aviation. He served as the chief of the Gagarin Air Force Academy from August 1973 until October 1988, during which he was promoted to the rank of Marshal of Aviation in 1981. The Gagarin Air Force Academy assignment represented one of the most prestigious positions available to aviation officers. Academy chiefs influenced not just individual pilot training, but the doctrinal development and technological evolution of entire air forces. The 15-year tenure as Academy chief provided stability and continuity during a period of rapid technological change in military aviation. The 1970s and 80s witnessed the introduction of fourth-generation fighters, precision-guided munitions, and advanced electronic warfare systems that revolutionized air combat. Academy leadership required understanding of both traditional combat principles and emerging technologies. The promotion to Marshal of Aviation in 1981 placed Skomorokhov among the very highest ranks of Soviet military leadership. Marshal rank, equivalent to full general in Western militaries, was typically reserved for officers who had demonstrated exceptional competence in both operational and strategic roles. The promotion confirmed decades of successful service and continued confidence from political leadership. Marshal of Aviation represented not just personal achievement, but responsibility for the development and deployment of Soviet air power on a global scale. Marshals influenced procurement decisions, doctrinal development, international military cooperation, and strategic planning that affected national security and international relations. Such positions required balancing military professionalism with political sophistication. The combination of academy leadership and marshal rank positioned Skomorokhov as one of the most influential figures in Soviet aviation during the final decades of the Cold War. His opinions on aircraft development, pilot training, and tactical doctrine carried weight throughout the military hierarchy and influenced decisions that affected thousands of personnel and billions of rubles in military expenditure. From 1988 until his retirement in 1992, he served as an advisor to the Ministry of Defense of the USSR. The advisory position provided a graceful transition from operational command to retirement while maintaining access to senior leadership and continued influence over military policy. Ministry advisors typically focused on long-term planning and strategic analysis rather than day-to-day operational management. The timing of retirement, 1992, coincided with the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the fundamental transformation of Russian military forces. Officers who had spent entire careers serving the Soviet system found themselves adapting to radically different political and economic circumstances. Skomorokhov's retirement marked the end of an era in Russian military aviation. In addition to his role in the military, he served as a deputy in the Supreme Soviet from 1963 to 1974. Political positions alongside military responsibilities were common for senior Soviet officers, reflecting the integration of military and civilian leadership in the Soviet system. Supreme Soviet deputies participated in legislative processes and provided military perspectives on national policy decisions. The 11-year tenure as Supreme Soviet deputy spanned a crucial period in Soviet history, including the Brezhnev era's military buildup and the early stages of détente with the United States. Deputies with military backgrounds provided crucial insights into defense spending, strategic planning, and the practical implications of foreign policy decisions on military readiness. He was killed in a car accident in Monino on 14 October 1994 and was buried in the Novodevichy Cemetery. The irony cuts deep. A man who survived 600 combat missions and 143 aerial duels ultimately fell victim to something as mundane as automotive transportation. The Novodevichy Cemetery, final resting place for many Soviet heroes and cultural figures, provides an appropriately dignified setting for someone who embodied the best traditions of Russian military service. The meteoric rise from village mechanic to Marshal of Aviation inevitably generated whispers among those who observed Soviet military politics from various distances. Did Skomorokhov possess some special connection to party leadership that accelerated his advancement? Were his achievements somehow exaggerated for propaganda purposes? These questions, whispered in officers' clubs and debated in military academies, reflect broader uncertainties about how individual merit competed with political influence in determining career trajectories. Critics pointed to the unusual speed of his promotion through senior ranks during the post-war period. From regimental command in 1950 to divisional command by 1954, then corps leadership by the early 1960s, such rapid advancement might suggest political favoritism rather than purely professional competence. Yet supporters countered that exceptional wartime records deserved exceptional peacetime recognition, particularly for officers who demonstrated administrative abilities alongside combat excellence. The favorite son narrative gained traction among some observers who noted Skomorokhov's consistent assignment to prestigious positions. Academy leadership, corps command in East Germany, and eventual marshal rank represented the most desirable career progression available to aviation officers. Skeptics wondered whether less politically connected officers with similar combat records received comparable opportunities for advancement. Historians continue debating the extent to which personal relationships influenced military promotions during the Soviet era. The system officially emphasized merit-based selection, but informal networks of patronage and political connections undoubtedly affected career outcomes. Skomorokhov's case provides ammunition for both sides of this argument, depending on which evidence receives greater emphasis. Some military analysts questioned specific aspects of his combat record, noting that victory claims from the Eastern Front often suffered from verification problems. The chaos of aerial combat made precise accounting difficult, and political pressures sometimes influenced official tallies. However, similar uncertainties affected all Soviet aces, and Skomorokhov's 47 confirmed victories fell well within the range of credible achievement for pilots of his experience level. The creation and dissolution of the elite Squadron of Aces in 1944 generated particular controversy among military historians. Critics argued that such units were primarily propaganda exercises designed to create heroes rather than tactical innovations intended to maximize combat effectiveness. The squadron's brief 3-month existence and subsequent disbandment seemed to support this interpretation. Yet defenders pointed out that concentrating exceptional pilots in specialized units made perfect tactical sense, even if administrative considerations ultimately forced their return to regular formations. The squadron's impressive combat record during its brief existence suggested genuine military value rather than mere propaganda theater. The tensions between elite specialization and distributed leadership reflected broader challenges in military organization that extended beyond individual personalities. Speculation about Skomorokhov's tactical methods also persisted among aviation professionals. Some observers suggested that his perfect survival record indicated excessive caution rather than exceptional skill. They argued that truly aggressive pilots inevitably suffered combat damage, and those who completed hundreds of missions unscathed might have avoided the most dangerous assignments or engagement parameters. Counter-arguments emphasized that survival itself represented a crucial combat skill that separated professional warriors from reckless glory seekers. The ability to consistently engage enemy aircraft while avoiding damage required sophisticated tactical thinking, precise aircraft handling, and careful risk assessment. Pilots who combined high victory totals with perfect survival records demonstrated mastery of aerial combat rather than avoidance of genuine danger. Skomorokhov's influence on modern Russian military aviation extends far beyond his individual combat record or administrative achievements. His career trajectory from enlisted mechanic to marshal rank provided a powerful example of merit-based advancement that inspired generations of military personnel. The narrative of humble origins transcended through exceptional performance resonated particularly strongly in a society that officially celebrated working-class heroes. Contemporary Russian Air Force training programs continue incorporating tactical principles that Skomorokhov helped develop during his academy leadership years. The emphasis on combining individual excellence with unit effectiveness, the integration of aggressive tactics with prudent risk management, and the development of situational awareness through repeated exposure to simulated combat scenarios all reflect his influence on pilot education methodology. Military academies throughout the former Soviet Union feature his biography in courses on leadership development and professional ethics. Students study his progression from combat pilot to senior commander as an example of how technical competence, personal courage, and administrative skill could be successfully combined in a single career. His story provides concrete illustration of abstract principles about military professionalism and career development. The Gagarin Air Force Academy, where Skomorokhov served as chief for 15 years, maintains displays and archives that document his contributions to pilot training and doctrine development. Visitors can examine curricula that he approved, training aircraft that operated under his direction, and graduation records of pilots who learned under programs he supervised. The tangible evidence of his educational impact provides lasting testament to achievements that extended far beyond individual combat performance. Aviation museums across Russia feature exhibits that place Skomorokhov's achievements within broader contexts of aerial warfare evolution. His career spanned the transition from propeller-driven fighters to jet aircraft, from visual range combat to beyond visual range engagements, and from individual dueling to integrated air defense systems. Museum curators use his biography to illustrate these technological and tactical transformations. Professional military journals continue publishing analytical articles that examine various aspects of his career and their relevance to contemporary challenges. Topics include the role of combat experience in senior leadership development, the balance between specialized excellence and general competence, and the adaptation of wartime heroes to peacetime responsibilities. Academic researchers find his career particularly valuable for case study analysis. International aviation historians frequently compare Skomorokhov's achievements with those of notable aces from other nations and conflicts. His 47 victories place him among the top tier of World War II fighter pilots, while his subsequent career provides examples of successful transition from combat leadership to institutional management. Such comparisons help evaluate the relative effectiveness of different military systems and career development approaches. The integration of individual achievement with collective success that characterized Skomorokhov's approach influenced Soviet and Russian military doctrine more broadly. His emphasis on unit effectiveness alongside personal performance provided models for balancing competitive individual excellence with cooperative team dynamics. Modern military organizations continue struggling with these same challenges as they attempt to maximize both individual potential and collective capability. Flight training programs in post-Soviet air forces incorporate lessons learned from analysis of his combat techniques and survival strategies. The tactical principles he developed through hundreds of combat engagements provide practical guidance for contemporary pilots facing different but related challenges. His methods for managing stress, making rapid decisions, and maintaining situational awareness remain relevant despite significant technological changes in aircraft and weapon systems. Veterans who served alongside Skomorokhov during various phases of his career shared memories that official biographies rarely captured. Fellow pilots recalled his meticulous preparation before combat missions, spending extra time studying weather reports, enemy activity summaries, and aircraft maintenance records. This attention to detail contrasted with more impulsive colleagues who relied primarily on reflexes and courage rather than systematic preparation. Squadron mates remembered his unusual ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, a quality that proved contagious during crisis situations. When formations encountered overwhelming enemy opposition or faced mechanical emergencies, Skomorokhov's steady voice on the radio provided psychological anchoring that helped other pilots maintain discipline and effectiveness. This leadership by example extended far beyond formal command relationships. Ground crews who maintained his aircraft developed particular respect for his technical knowledge and considerate treatment of enlisted personnel. Unlike some pilots who viewed mechanics as subordinates, Skomorokhov engaged with maintenance teams as professional partners whose expertise directly affected mission success. His background as a factory mechanic provided common ground for relationships that transcended military hierarchy. Academy students from his tenure as chief recalled a demanding but fair instructor who emphasized practical application over theoretical knowledge. Skomorokhov frequently interrupted classroom lectures to share personal anecdotes that illustrated abstract principles through concrete examples. Students appreciated these insights from someone who had actually experienced the situations being discussed, rather than simply studied them. One particularly revealing incident occurred during a training exercise when a student pilot became disoriented in cloud cover and panicked on the radio. Instead of issuing sharp commands or criticism, Skomorokhov calmly talked the young aviator through the recovery procedure while personally launching in another aircraft to provide visual guidance. The student later became a successful pilot and credited this experience with teaching him both technical skills and leadership philosophy. Administrative colleagues from his various staff positions remembered his unusual combination of strategic thinking and attention to operational details. While many senior officers delegated routine matters to subordinates, Skomorokhov maintained direct involvement in pilot training, aircraft maintenance, and unit readiness. This hands-on approach sometimes frustrated staff officers, but consistently produced superior unit performance. Personal friends described a man who remained remarkably modest despite extraordinary achievements and high rank. Skomorokhov rarely discussed his combat record in social settings, preferring conversations about technical developments in aviation or the professional progress of former students. This self-deprecating attitude contrasted sharply with more typical military personalities who emphasized their own accomplishments. Family members recalled someone who struggled with the transition from military to civilian life after retirement. The structure and purpose that had defined decades of service proved difficult to replace with recreational activities or volunteer commitments. Like many military retirees, Skomorokhov found civilian society somewhat bewildering after a lifetime of clear hierarchies and defined objectives. Medical personnel who conducted his routine physical examinations noted the cumulative effects of decades of high-stress military service. Despite his perfect combat record, repeated exposure to extreme G-forces, irregular sleep schedules, and psychological pressure had taken measurable tolls on his physical condition. These hidden costs of military service rarely appeared in official accounts of heroic achievement. Weather officers who briefed him before combat missions during the war remembered his exceptional ability to visualize three-dimensional atmospheric conditions and their tactical implications. While most pilots focused on basic visibility and wind information, Skomorokhov asked detailed questions about cloud layers, temperature gradients, and regional weather patterns that could affect combat engagement geometry. Intelligence officers recalled his valuable contributions to enemy aircraft identification and tactical assessment. Skomorokhov's extensive combat experience provided practical insights that complemented formal intelligence analysis. His ability to distinguish between different enemy pilot skill levels based on observed flight behavior proved particularly useful for mission planning and threat assessment. Unit historians who documented squadron and regimental activities found Skomorokhov unusually cooperative in providing accurate accounts of combat engagements. Many pilots either exaggerated their achievements or provided vague descriptions that hindered historical accuracy. But his reports consistently included specific details that could be verified through multiple sources. Away from military formalities and public ceremonies, Nikolai Skomorokhov revealed himself as someone who never entirely shed his peasant origins, despite decades of exposure to Soviet elite culture. Colleagues noted his preference for simple foods, practical clothing, and straightforward conversation that avoided unnecessary complexity or pretension. The village boy from Lapo remained visible beneath the marshal's uniform. His personal habits reflected the discipline that had enabled survival through hundreds of combat missions. Morning routines, exercise regimens, and evening preparation followed consistent patterns that provided structure and predictability. Friends recognized these behaviors as coping mechanisms that had originally developed under wartime stress, but continued serving useful purposes during peacetime challenges. Despite his public image as a fearless warrior, family members knew someone who worried constantly about the safety and welfare of subordinates. Combat commanders who sent young pilots into dangerous situations carried psychological burdens that rarely received public acknowledgement. Skomorokhov's concern for pilot training and safety standards reflected personal experience with the costs of military service. His relationship with technology evolved throughout his career, from hands-on mechanical expertise to strategic oversight of complex systems. Early experience as a factory worker and aircraft mechanic provided intuitive understanding of engineering principles that proved valuable when evaluating new aircraft designs or training equipment. This technical background distinguished him from many senior officers who lacked practical engineering experience. Personal correspondence and diary entries, when made available to researchers, revealed someone who thought deeply about the moral implications of warfare and military service. The necessity of taking human lives in combat, the responsibility for sending subordinates into danger, and the broader purposes served by military institutions prompted philosophical reflections that contrasted with his public image as a straightforward professional soldier. His reading habits encompassed technical manuals, historical accounts, and literary works that provided intellectual stimulation beyond purely military subjects. Academy colleagues remembered discussions about Russian literature, European history, and political philosophy that demonstrated intellectual curiosity extending far beyond aviation and military affairs. This broader learning contributed to his effectiveness in senior positions that required understanding of complex social and political factors. The transition from active service to retirement proved more difficult than many observers expected. The purpose and structure that had defined his adult life disappeared overnight, leaving psychological voids that recreational activities and family relationships couldn't entirely fill. Like many military retirees, he struggled to find meaningful civilian roles that utilized his skills and experience while providing comparable satisfaction. Physical manifestations of decades of military service became increasingly apparent during his later years. The cumulative effects of high-altitude flying, extreme G-forces, and chronic stress produced medical conditions that required ongoing treatment. Veterans' hospitals provided care for problems that resulted directly from military service but received little public attention or recognition. His influence on family members reflected both positive examples of dedication and service alongside negative consequences of military careers that demanded total commitment. Children and grandchildren inherited pride in his achievements, while also observing the personal costs associated with exceptional professional success. The family dynamics illustrated broader tensions between individual accomplishment and personal relationships. Financial circumstances during retirement remained modest despite his high military rank and numerous decorations. Soviet military pay scales, while providing security and prestige, didn't generate wealth comparable to civilian careers in business or technology. Marshal Skomorokhov's lifestyle during his final years reflected the economic realities faced by most military retirees rather than the luxury that might be expected based on his public reputation. The final assessment of Nikolai Skomorokhov's significance requires balancing his undeniable achievements against the broader context of his era and circumstances. His rise from rural poverty to military leadership epitomized Soviet ideals about merit-based advancement, while his combat record provided concrete evidence of individual excellence under extreme pressure. Yet his story also illustrated the personal costs associated with exceptional service and the challenges faced by military heroes adapting to civilian life. His legacy endures not simply because of the aircraft he shot down or the rank he achieved, but because his career demonstrated that ordinary individuals could achieve extraordinary things through dedication, skill, and perseverance. The village mechanic, who became Marshal of Aviation, provided inspiration for countless others while contributing substantially to his nation's survival during its darkest hours and subsequent emergence as a global superpower. The questions that surrounded his career, about favoritism, about tactics, about the balance between individual achievement and collective success, remain relevant for contemporary military organizations grappling with similar challenges. His example continues informing debates about leadership development, professional education, and the integration of combat experience with institutional management. Perhaps most importantly, Skomorokhov's story reminds us that behind every military statistic and every heroic narrative stands a human being who struggled with doubt, fear, ambition, and responsibility just like everyone else. His achievements seem more rather than less impressive when viewed through this lens of common humanity, proving that heroism emerges from ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances with uncommon determination and skill.